approximately 4 days of work. And he came into your home, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to rule on behalf of the defendant. You're going to pay the $50,000 that he's requesting. The services that he asked for, $15,000, you are going to pay that. And plus you're going to pay an additional $25,000 for the damages that you caused to him.
Excuse me? I'm the victim here.
No, ma'am. You are not the victim.
Yes, I am. This is crazy. I
Ma'am?
don't deserve this.
Whoa.
No.
Miss Dixon, you are hereby held in contempt of court.
You are under arrest, ma'am.
Jeff Herpin, arrest her and get her out of my courtroom.
Nobody does this to me. I didn't do anything.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Let's look at one of the wildest court cases involving a woman named Julie Dixon, who took the idea of entitlement to a whole new level. Picture this. Julie hires a handyman named Eric Parker to do some basic repairs around her house. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, buckle up, because what started as a routine handyman job quickly turned into an outrageous courtroom battle over missing beer, unpaid work, and a meltdown that ended with Julie being arrested. Julie Dixon, thinking she was in for a simple home improvement project, hired Eric Parker to fix up a few things around her house. His tasks included repairing the toilet, fixing the shower, and sorting out some leaky pipes. However, after a few days on the job, Julie claimed Eric wasn't doing his work properly. She accused him of leaving the job half-finished, causing water damage, and, here's the kicker, stealing food and drinks from her fridge. Yes, you heard that right. She dragged him to court, claiming he helped himself to her food, and even took some beers without asking.
Can you give me this document to show what we're talking about?
Here's my forms, the prices I typically charge, right there.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. She signed this?
Well.
You signed this?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
I'm looking at a document, and although this looks like your name, you signed a document. You signed a contract. You told me it was verbal. I'm looking at a contract that you actually signed. Give me a second.
According to Julie, Eric was not only a terrible handyman, but also a thief who left her house in worse shape than when he arrived. She filed a lawsuit demanding a whopping $155,000 in damages. But that wasn't all. Julie also accused Eric of secretly videotaping her without her consent while he worked in her home. What started as a handyman complaint quickly spiraled into a full-blown legal battle with accusations. Now here's where things get interesting. During the court proceedings, Julie stood firm in her claim that Eric had stolen from her. She insisted that he took drinks, specifically a bottle of water and 3 beers, from her fridge without asking. And of course, in true Karen fashion, she declared herself the victim of this supposed theft. According to her, this was a major violation of trust, and she made sure the court knew just how offended she was. Eric, on the other hand, wasn't having it. When asked to explain, he admitted to taking a single bottle of water from the fridge, but for a pretty valid reason. It was a hot day, and he was working on the air conditioner. He denied the beer accusation and defended himself, saying that any other claims Julie made were either exaggerated or flat out false. In his defense, he even explained that Julie hadn't paid him for his work, which is why he left the job unfinished. But the drama didn't stop there. Things took an even stranger turn when Julie accused Eric of videotaping her without her consent. She claimed that he secretly recorded her and even posted the video online. Eric, however, had a different story. He explained that Julie became so hostile and aggressive during one of his workdays that he recorded her for his own protection, just in case she made any false accusations. Which, spoiler alert, she did. In the end, the court didn't buy this Karen's story. She hadn't provided any evidence to support her claims of stolen food or damages caused by Eric's work. There were no photos, no witnesses, and no real proof that Eric had done anything wrong. It became clear that this case was more about her anger and entitlement than any real wrongdoing. The judge threw out her claims due to a lack of evidence. The story doesn't end there, though. After the ruling, Julie couldn't contain her frustration. She had a full-blown meltdown in the courtroom, shouting at the judge and declaring, "I'm the victim here." Unfortunately for her, this outburst landed her in even deeper trouble. The judge found her in contempt of court and ordered her arrest on the spot. Meanwhile, Eric came out on top. Not only were Julie's claims dismissed, but the judge awarded him $50,000 in damages for his unpaid work and the stress she caused him throughout the ordeal.
What happens before now and then with concerning bond?
You're out on bond now, Mr. Jackson. Is there some aspect that you want to have addressed?
Yeah, I have to. Well, it's Ramadan right now, and I have religious obligations as well as work obligations in general. And it wasn't a drug case or have anything related with drugs. Like I don't see the reason for being on for drug testing.
He's on intermediate supervision. I'm disinclined to change that at this point. I'm not sure why Ramadan would interfere with his testing.
This next case involves Jiab Jackson, one of our pushiest Karens who found himself in a courtroom for all the wrong reasons. Charged with possession of a firearm by a felon and resisting arrest, Jackson was out on bond and already walking a fine line with the court. But instead of keeping a low profile, he turned his pre-trial hearing into a bizarre showdown that left everyone, including the judge, frustrated. So here's how it all started. Jackson was charged with carrying a concealed weapon, possession of a firearm by a felon, and resisting arrest. Already facing some serious legal trouble, he appeared in court to discuss his bond conditions. Now, part of his release required regular drug testing, which is a standard condition for people out on bond. But Jackson wasn't happy about it. You see, it was Ramadan, and he felt that drug testing during this holy month was an unnecessary burden on him.
Well, it's not celebratory, sir. I just fail to see the connection with the nature of my case and having to go out of my way and pay money that I really don't have and time that I don't have to drug test on this matter, especially
That's not a basis for me to change it. I'm not changing it. I'm going to leave his bond as continued. We can see him on the 4th.
During the hearing, Jackson asked the judge to make an exception for him because of his religious obligations. He explained that Ramadan involves fasting from dawn to sunset, and between work, religious duties, and the drug tests, he was stretched too thin. He also mentioned that the cost of these drug tests was putting a financial strain on him, as if all these issues were the court's fault. Now, here's where things get messy. Instead of calmly making his request and letting his attorney handle the situation, Jackson kept interrupting the judge. It was like watching someone talk themselves into deeper and deeper trouble. He couldn't take no for an answer. The judge, Cedric Simpson, politely told him that while he respected Ramadan, the drug testing would remain in place as a condition of his bond. But Jackson wouldn't stop. He kept pushing, trying to argue his case, despite the judge's warnings to stay quiet.
You just got to do better. There is no reason coming in here today that this should even be occurring. Tell you what, Ms. Gaines tells me that I should give you another chance, and Mr. Brown told me the same thing. These are these people you won't listen to, by the way. But if they tell me to give you another chance, I'll give you another chance. But I'm gonna let you know, you don't have any other opportunity with me to mess up. Am I understood?
Get it yesterday.
Pardon?
He said to get it yesterday.
All right, his bond can continue. He can be released.
At one point, the judge even told him, "You don't have to respond to everything that's said. You don't have to get the last word." But Jackson wasn't having it. He was convinced that if he kept talking, somehow he'd win the argument. He even brought up the fact that he was a young black man fighting for his freedom, but the judge cut him off quickly, reminding him that the hearing wasn't about that. It was about his bond conditions. The more Jackson pushed, the more the judge's patience wore thin. Eventually, after countless interruptions and a total disregard for courtroom decorum, the judge had enough and found Jackson in contempt of court. At this point, Jackson was taken out of the hearing and brought back later for a face-to-face appearance in court. When Jackson was brought back into court, you could tell things weren't looking good for him. The judge was already frustrated with how things had gone, and Jackson's attitude hadn't done him any favors. However, Jackson's new public defender stepped in and pleaded with the judge, saying that Jackson would let his lawyer do the talking from here on out. Jackson, this time, stayed quiet. Judge Simpson, probably realizing that Jackson had been digging his own grave with all the talking earlier, gave him one last chance. The judge didn't change the bond conditions, though. Jackson would still need to undergo drug testing as part of his release, but he was allowed to remain free on bond. The judge, however, made it crystal clear that this was Jackson's last opportunity to follow the rules. If he messed up again, it would mean immediate consequences. This case is a perfect example of someone thinking that persistence alone can change the outcome. But as Jiab Jackson learned the hard way, refusing to listen to the judge and interrupting repeatedly only makes things worse. It's one thing to ask for special consideration, especially when it involves religious obligations. But Jackson crossed the line when he ignored every warning and kept talking over the judge. In the end, he didn't get the result he wanted. His drug testing requirements stayed in place, and he nearly lost his bond for his courtroom behavior. The lesson here? Sometimes keeping quiet and letting your lawyer do the talking is the best strategy, especially when you're in front of a judge who's already given you multiple warnings. Jackson's persistence didn't pay off, and if anything, it nearly got him back behind bars.
You're gonna leave my warrant. Is there any way you could, like, quash it? Ma'am, I know I'm messed up.
Don't use that language in court. That's contempt.
I'm so sorry. I know I messed up big time. And I really apologize for lying to you in your court. That was really not a good idea.
But at this point, local police have arrived to arrest Green on her warrant.
Law enforcement is on.
All right. Are you there for her on her warrant, Marshal?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're going with him now. Then we're gonna quit playing games. You better call your mom and tell her you cost her $7,500 on her bond. You go with him. All right.
Let's talk about one of the most ridiculous courtroom blunders you've probably never heard of. Picture this. Sarris Green, a 24-year-old woman facing drug charges, pulls one of the most bizarre stunts you can imagine during a virtual court hearing. What started as a routine hearing turned into a cringe-worthy spectacle when Green tried to lie her way out of trouble, only to be caught red-handed, and in the most embarrassing way possible. Sarris Green had been arrested for drug possession and was out on bond after her mom had posted a hefty $7,500 to get her released. The problem was she skipped her scheduled court date, which led to a warrant being issued for her arrest. So now she's facing the court virtually, trying to explain herself and hoping to avoid being taken back into custody. In the hearing, Green tells the judge that she's in Alaska. Yep, Alaska. She explains that she's staying there, possibly to give the impression that she's far away and not in a position to easily return for a court appearance. The judge, cautious but calm, starts questioning her. At first, things seem to be going okay, but then the lie unravels in the most awkward way possible. While Green is talking, a man suddenly appears in the background of her Zoom call. This guy, Dale, is definitely not in Alaska. In fact, it turns out that they're both actually in Pueblo, Colorado. The judge immediately catches on and starts pressing her for the truth. You can almost feel the tension through the screen as Green realizes she's been caught. Instead of coming clean, Green tries to backtrack and explain her way out of the situation. She stumbles over her words, offering up excuses that make less and less sense as she goes. You can tell she's in full panic mode, especially when the judge starts questioning her about Dale, who's awkwardly trying to stay out of the frame. At this point, Green's emotions take over. She starts getting teary-eyed, pleading with the judge to dismiss the warrant despite being caught in a lie. She even tries to justify why she lied about being in Alaska, but it's clear to everyone watching that this isn't going to end well. Now, here's the part where things could have gone a lot differently if Green had just told the truth. The judge was initially inclined to dismiss the warrant, especially since Green seemed genuinely apologetic at the start of the hearing. But once the lie came out, all bets were off. The judge, understandably upset by the dishonesty, decided not to lift the warrant after all. Instead, the warrant was upheld, and law enforcement officers were immediately dispatched to Green's location. Within minutes, they arrived at the door, and the judge calmly told her that she would be taken into custody. You can imagine the look of pure disbelief and regret on Green's face as she was arrested on the spot, all because she thought she could lie her way out of trouble. This case is a perfect example of how lying, especially to a judge, can backfire spectacularly. Sarah Green thought she could pull a fast one by claiming to be in Alaska, but the truth came out in the most embarrassing way possible. Her Karen moment was a clear reminder that deception in court never ends well, especially when the evidence, like a person walking into the frame during a Zoom call, is right in front of the judge. In the end, Green's lie cost her more than just embarrassment. It cost her her freedom, at least for the time being. So if there's one thing to take away from this, it's that honesty really is the best policy, especially when you're already in hot water with the law.
You're a biased judge, and I can't wait to appeal to see my case. I'm innocent.
Is that why you were laughing throughout the statements by the sister of? Is that why you were laughing, sir?
She was laughing at me.
Anything else, sir?
Yes.
Go ahead, finish.
I'm innocent.
You've said that already. Anything else?
I'm innocent.
Before imposing sentence, the judge has a few final words for the defendant.
The defendant stands before this court professing his innocence, and regardless of whether you admit to brutally murdering her, you wouldn't sit at sentencing and laugh about it. That's, sir, your time to speak has ended. It's now the court's time to speak. If you can't conduct yourself appropriately, we'll send you back into the jail and I'll sentence you without you here. Here's the bottom line, sir. Anyone with a shred of human decency would not sit in the courtroom.
Now, this next case isn't your typical Karen situation, but it's equally disturbing for an entirely different reason. Imagine being in a courtroom, witnessing the sentencing of a man convicted of second-degree murder, and instead of remorse, he sits there smiling and laughing. That's exactly what happened with Alvin Foy. Alvin Foy had been convicted of second-degree murder, among other charges, after a violent incident in Albany, New York, where he and an accomplice fired 31 shots into a crowd. One of those bullets tragically killed an 18-year-old high school senior named China Forney, who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And laugh at the sentencing. One more time, Mr. Mills, let your client know I'm about to send him back into the holding cells. Any individual with a shred of human decency would not laugh, regardless of whether he wanted to assert his innocence or not. He would not laugh and make a joke and slouch in the chair and act like this is a bus stop or a bodega or a park bench.
I was wrongfully convicted.
Take the defendant back into the courtroom. Throw back into the holding cells. Pull his pants up while you're doing it, please. So the courtroom doesn't have to observe that. I'm going to sentence the defendant in his absence, because he obviously has shown that he cannot conduct himself appropriately.
You would think after such a serious crime and knowing he was facing up to 25 years to life in prison, Foy might show some kind of remorse or respect during his sentencing. But no, he did the exact opposite. During the victim impact statement, China's sister was reading an emotional letter about the loss of her beloved sibling. It was a heartbreaking moment for everyone in the courtroom. Everyone, that is, except for Foy. Instead of sitting solemnly, as you might expect, Foy smirked, smiled, and even laughed while China's sister poured her heart out. The judge, Roger McDonough, wasn't having it. He called out Foy for his inappropriate behavior right there in the courtroom, telling him that his laughing and smiling during such a serious moment was not only disrespectful, but downright disturbing. But Foy didn't care. He continued to make faces as if the whole thing was a joke. When it came time for Foy to speak, he didn't apologize. He didn't express regret. Instead, he kept up his cavalier attitude, which only further angered the judge. Foy's complete disregard for the gravity of the situation, for the life he'd taken, and for the pain he'd caused China's family was shocking. In response to his behavior, Judge McDonough finally had enough. He ordered Foy out of the courtroom, stating that if he couldn't act like a human being during the sentencing, then he didn't deserve to be there. Foy was removed, and the judge sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison. But even as he was being taken away, Foy didn't stop. He kept laughing, acting like the whole thing was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. It was a chilling display of a total lack of empathy. This case serves as a stark reminder that not everyone who faces the consequences of their actions shows regret or remorse. While Alvin Foy may not be a typical Karen, his behavior in the courtroom was just as shocking, if not more so, because of the seriousness of his crime. Foy's lack of empathy, his laughter during such a solemn moment, and his mocking attitude in court turned the entire sentencing into a spectacle. It's hard to understand how anyone could act this way after taking a life. But Foy's case proves that some people lack even the most basic sense of decency.
You guys would not let me say anything in this courtroom.
Just one moment. Your connection has not been good. And when you start answering a question, I'm not hearing everything you're saying, so I'm asking you to stop talking.
Okay, well, I'm talking right now. I am talking right now, Your Honor. I'm talking.
No, you're not talking. I just muted you. Now, please stop, because I see that you're still talking. You can continue to waste your breath. I muted you.
If you thought the Karen stories couldn't get any wilder, let me introduce you to Markia Stevenson. She's someone who took avoiding responsibility to a whole new level by abusing the legal system, repeatedly. Instead of paying her rent or facing the consequences, she kept finding new ways to dodge eviction by filing for bankruptcy over and over. Markia Stevenson was facing eviction after owing her landlord a staggering $12,000 in back rent. Instead of settling the debt or working out a solution, she had another tactic in mind: filing for bankruptcy again and again. By doing this, she was able to delay the eviction process multiple times, frustrating the landlord, their attorney, and the court itself. In this case, the landlord's attorney came prepared, accusing Stevenson of abusing the bankruptcy system to avoid facing the inevitable. And to be fair, he wasn't wrong. Stevenson was using every trick in the book to stay in her apartment without paying rent, and the attorney was determined to put a stop to it. Things really went off the rails when Stevenson had to appear in court virtually. And if you thought she'd calmly explain herself, you'd be wrong. As soon as the hearing began, Stevenson was on the defensive, shouting, yelling, and insisting that she didn't even need to be in court. She claimed the bankruptcy filings protected her from eviction and seemed to believe she was above the rules. The judge, doing their best to maintain order, tried to calm Stevenson down, but she wasn't having it. She continued to yell at the court, showing zero respect for the legal process. At one point, the judge had no choice but to mute her to get some control over the situation. But even while muted, Stevenson didn't stop. She kept shouting, her words no longer heard by the court, but still visible to anyone watching the video. You could tell the judge's patience was wearing thin. I mean, how long can someone keep yelling at a judge before realizing it's not doing them any favors? Stevenson clearly thought her outbursts would somehow make the judge back down or rethink the case, but it only made things worse for her. After what must have felt like an eternity of chaos, the judge finally regained control of the hearing. Instead of ruling immediately, the judge decided to give Stevenson one last chance to defend herself, this time in person. The judge rescheduled the hearing and made it clear that if Stevenson didn't show up, there would be serious consequences. It was the ultimate warning. The judge told her that failing to appear in person would mean the court would rule in the landlord's favor, and all her excuses, bankruptcy filings, and shouting matches would no longer protect her. But you know what? Stevenson, being the classic Karen she is, didn't take the warning seriously. The day of the in-person hearing came and, surprise, surprise, Stevenson didn't show up. Whether she thought she could get away with it again or simply didn't care at this point, her absence sealed her fate. The court ruled against her, and the landlord was finally able to move forward with the eviction process after months of delays. Markia Stevenson's case is a perfect example of someone pushing the system too far. While bankruptcy laws are there to help people get back on their feet, Stevenson twisted them into a tool to avoid facing the consequences of her actions. She thought she could game the system forever, but eventually, the court had enough. Her outrageous behavior in court, yelling at the judge, refusing to listen, and not showing up for her final hearing only made things worse. It's one thing to try and find legal loopholes, but when you blatantly disrespect the court and push your luck too far, there's no sympathy left. In the end, Stevenson's attempts to avoid eviction backfired, and she learned the hard way that even the legal system has its limits.